Welcome to a new episode of The Inside Rip. Today's guest, Ryan Johnson, aka the CardCollector2. Ryan is one of the most prestigious voices in this space. So whether you're a newcomer or a veteran, everything that he had to say on today's podcast is going to be really valuable, and we hope you enjoy. One of the things that I have personally watched you do since I've entered the hobby is you negotiating. You do it all the time. It's personally very fun to watch. And you do it so fluidly without insulting the seller, which is impressive on its own, while also getting a deal done. So again, we're putting we the hobby, like our goal here is to just educate the person that is in the hobby, appreciates the space for what it is. So want to ask you, again, just from your perspective, which is a big perspective to have, but limited. I'll give you, again, we do not want anyone coming after Ryan, but to get your idea, the art of negotiation. Like, what makes the practice different in the hobby than perhaps another space like buying a car or thrifting or something else?
That's a great question. Yeah, as someone who's bought a car before, very different, going in there and asking to take 20% off of comps on a car. Like, that just doesn't work. So a whole different game there. Yeah, so definitely, like I said, definitely a lot different than some of the other spaces. The negotiation thing is, I appreciate you acknowledging it. It's something I really pride myself in the content space, just as someone that can like teach kids. I think my goal, and I've always shared this, is like my goal with content is to be something I didn't have when I was a kid. Like, be who you needed when you were younger. That's like a quote I like am very, very passionate about. And, there wasn't anybody out there saying, like, hey, you could make a career in this. Hey, this is how you negotiate. Like, this is why you start higher. This is why you don't talk after you give your first number. Like, there's a lot of things you can learn. And I think being a resource to the youth and other collectors in general, like, but specifically, like, the youth, the upcoming generation, like, ultimately who we're going to pass this hobby on to. I think just being able to give tips and tricks on how to negotiate, they don't teach you that in middle school. Like, you're not taught that in class. You learn about, all sorts of silly stuff, but you don't learn about.
I would gladly learn this in class if it was taught to me.
You don't learn that on there, and I didn't know. And I think in some of my content, it's meant to teach people what I didn't know, and maybe some of the mistakes I learned about negotiating the hard way. So, definitely a lot different though than buying a car. I don't think a car cares too much about card ladder comps. So.
Yeah. So what is the key to not pissing people off, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of times, like, I start with like just trying to get a vibe from the seller beforehand. I think that's a big thing for me. It's like, if I'm not in the mood to negotiate, or you're not in the mood to negotiate, and just the vibe doesn't seem like it's there, I'll just move on. I'll just immediately remove myself from the situation. Okay. And that's just to be more cautious, right? Like, I also understand, because of the size of our audience, that like we can be put under a microscope if something goes astray. Like, if we're rude, or unintentionally, if we're rude, or we don't offer enough, or we offer, you just get comments online for all sorts of different things. So I think the first thing is just trying to match the vibe. If the energy is good and I can like the seller, then to me it's like easier to open up. And then it's okay, now it's looking for what cards I like. I'll give one of my tips away, and just like how I buy and what I look for. But usually if I feel I could get a deal done, I always try to find one piece that I look at in the showcase and I'm like, this is a card I would want. Like, this is a card, it feels close enough in price, it feels cool enough, I would want it for my collection, whatever it may be. I try to find that one piece. And then I try to find something or some things that are like similar to it. So other cards that are, okay, this is a good deal, I would want this is sneaky, whatever it may be. Like, they don't have to have the same reason. But then what I'll usually do is I'll start with a couple cards. So the card I want the most and one or two more. And I'll be like, what do you want on this, this, and this? Because then I'm looking for some kind of bulk discount for purchasing three of them. And sometimes people are like, hey, stickers are firm. And sometimes people give you 25% off or 5% off, right? You never know how it's going to, align. But I think if I have something I'm very interested in there to start, then adding pieces to it is just going to remove cost. Like my thought is, if I could sell those and make a little bit of money, that a little bit of money I'm going to make is just going to reduce the one piece I want the most. So I'm just looking for cards I can sell to make a few dollars on to then lower my costs on the piece I want most. And as we go, if the deal makes sense and I feel like I would take that deal, then I just continue to scan and say, well, what else could I potentially add at a lower cost that I believe in or would make sense to buy? And ultimately, that's what I look for.
That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate you sharing that. But that makes I would love to go thrift shopping with you too, so I could be like, hey Ryan, we're gonna get these 3 things, and we're gonna fill up this truck and go paint some chairs. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. If you want to, most people are trying to sell at the end of the day, so you are also helping them sell. If you're like, I'll get 3 things versus 1 thing, and
Sure.
then maybe that's also how you don't piss people off, because if you're negotiating on 1 thing, you might offend someone versus 3. Well, it makes sense of trying to go for a deal.
100%. And yeah, when you're buying in bulk, the idea is, okay, if you have 3 cards and they're $100 a piece, and that's $300. I might value the one at 70, but the other 2 at 95. And that person might say 80, 80, 80, right? Well, like
Right.
they're higher on the 2 of them and they're lower on the other one. Like I would pay more on this, but I would pay less on these. So usually it's easier to find a middle ground with multiple cards because you never know which card they have more room on and which card you value more. So that's kind of the nice part about about buying in bulk is there's some things you have more room on or care less about, and they might not match with what I feel is the better value or the card I want more. So if I can put them in a lot and piece it together, that kind of, the sentiment around the cards goes out the window because now we're just looking at 3 cards from your perspective and 3 cards from my perspective.
That's really, really smart. And you do not become this wise without a possible awkward situation that has taught you this space. So are there any stories that you can share of that? Oh goodness, that was awkward. And maybe that's how how it changed the way you do every negotiation.
Yeah, if you watch the content like closely, you'll see it a couple times. I don't have like a specific example per se, but one of the more common ones that you kind of got to deal with, and I see it, and you'll see it in my content if, like I said, because somebody will come up and say, I want to sell this card. It's really cool, and you're like, well, what do you want for it? And they'll be like, 6. And my thought is, well, there's no way this card could be $6,000. So it must mean 600. And again, I don't remember the exact card, but it'll be like, do you have any room? And then you either find out from like when they say, I would do 5,500, or they say, I would do 5. And you're like, you know what? I'll take it for 5. And then you go to pull out $500 and they're like, no, $5,000. You're like, this card's worth 700. Okay, it gets you in a kind of a predicament. There is when again you just use more like ambiguous like 5 or 6, not understanding. So when sometimes people bring stuff up and it'll be something, it usually happens on cards I don't know as much about. So like if we get into like you know some of the fringe sports, so like F1, hockey, you get into Pokemon or Disney, you get into some of these, like, I know a little bit more about Disney, but you get into some of the more obscure things. When people say that, I always ask now, if you watch in the content, it's like, they'll say 5, and I'll say 5,000 or 500, just to understand immediately if like we're, speaking the same language, or if this is like, I don't want a $5,000 NASCAR card, and you pass on it.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine, because you record and post these deals that you must look back and go, oh, Ryan, why?
Usually those deals just get cut out. Just because, again, like, especially if you go to try to like
pointless.
Yeah, it's just pointless. It's just like we're thousands of dollars apart. Usually you just cut it and move on. Not every deal makes it, unfortunately. There's a lot of footage at some of these shows. This from being in Dallas. Like, we film 8-9 hours in a row, like, on content. those Dallas videos can be 15 to 30 minutes. Like you've
Yep.
got to condense 9 hours of footage into a 30-minute YouTube video. There's just a lot, we just so much in there that you just can't include. So yeah, deals like that just unfortunately don't make it.
Is there a disadvantage to like the newbies, right? Is there a
Yeah.
disadvantage of being part of the hobby if you haven't lived it your whole life? Like how does one get through the barrier for entry? Like because the hobby is very confusing if you
Hmm.
get into it with no prior knowledge.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, I wouldn't say disadvantaged if you're willing to take the time. I think
Okay.
this hobby can be
Yeah.
very fast paced. And, as you guys know, like, think how many new products come out every week. Like, it's not like there's like one product a month for the entire trading card industry. Like, there's 15 to 30 a month between all of these different sports, non-sports. You start throwing in some TCG, like you just have so much. And again, like it's just so much different than it was pre-internet, mid 90s, first time major blow up. So I think the key now, and we just tell people, is like you just have to pace yourself. You have to understand if breaks are great, you know, there's good repacks out there. There's great hobby shops. Like there's good card shows. There's a lot of stuff out there. But if you come in and just start throwing money at anything and everything, that is, and you don't understand what you're buying or what you're getting into, or some of the risks that can go astray pretty quickly. So I think the most important thing is just patience, like understanding it. And again, like for us, like we do this full time, and some of it for me is like I've just learned some of these things along the way. So there
Mm-hmm.
is value in repetition. There is value in buying something and learning. I don't like that, right? That's not for me. I don't want to do that again. So there's value in
Hmm.
going through the repetition of buying. So I'm not saying don't get your feet wet. Like you ultimately have to. You can't get better at free throws. Asking ChatGPT how to get better at free throws, like that doesn't ultimately work. At some point, you have to shoot the free throw. But I think if you just come in and just start throwing darts at a wall on everything, it can become very overwhelming very quickly, and that usually leads to loss. So I think, and again, I think podcasts like this, I think content is a big part of it now, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something that didn't exist before. Is there are people out there telling you about different areas of the hobby and what they're seeing, and I think that can can be helpful in learning the hobby at a quicker pace than just trying to figure it out on your own, just throwing darts at a wall, hoping something sticks.
Yeah, no, I mean, our whole goal is to like normalize this where we are now talking about cards on SportsCenter regularly, on Yahoo. I mean, everyone now has sort of that special column. The Athletic does, ESPN does,
Yep.
Yahoo Sports does. Collectibles within the sports space is way more of a norm. But yeah, like what is that barrier for entry? Like, do they have to get all the white hairs that I have over the past 2 years to learn the space? Or is there sort of like, oh yeah, I love football. Patrick Mahomes, he's a good player. I should buy his cards. Yeah, well, if you want to break your bank now, you sure can. Or you're going to look
Sure.
at the upcoming draft class. You're going to look, right, like where is that space of who's going to win a Super Bowl over the next handful of years, right? That I think if you're a sports fan, you can get into it. But yeah,
Sure.
if you're without all knowledge, there is a welcoming, but we have to make mistakes in order to learn.
Sure.
Here's a fun question that I have for you, and it's in tandem. So,
Okay.
what is a take in the hobby that you believe in 100% in your brain?
Mm,
And then what is one take in the hobby that you believe in 100% in your gut?
mm. That's a good question. So what's something I believe in my brain to be 100% factual?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
We're making him think here.
yeah, making me think. I'm trying to think like what are some of the hot hobby takes? Like what are some of the hot ones you guys have heard that like because in my brain, I mean, first thing again, I'm trying to think of like some of the things in the space that I would die on a hill for, and that is like
Okay.
buy the goats, buy the goats, buy the
Okay.
best cards of the best players. Like
That
again, I don't know if that's necessarily the take you're looking for.
I think so.
But we kind of talked about it offline before, and like your entry to the hobby, and as someone that's covered sports, like why Matt Stafford sells for less than Shedeur Sanders, like doesn't make
Right.
any sense. You know what I mean? MVP and a Super Bowl win, like that's kind of crazy. So to me, the buying the goats is something in my brain I believe in. Pretty like that's as true as it gets. In my gut, what I think is, oh gosh, it's a good one. These are hard questions. I wasn't expecting to think so much. Um,
It's only Monday, Ryan. It's
yeah, I
only
know.
Monday.
I know it's only Monday.
I love
Jeez.
it. Well, we don't get this time with you, so I'm like, man, let's really think this out. But I
Um,
like the idea of buying goats. That makes a lot of sense. That's logical. I believe that in my brain. Patrick Mahomes, Jordan, Kobe, whoever you're going to buy of the GOAT, Tom Brady, their value doesn't really depreciate long term because they have already entered the GOAT
I have a good
phase.
one.
Okay.
So something that again is not as like prevalent per se as the goats, but something that just like seems like a gut thing. Um, First year matters in the long run. I think
Okay.
buying the first year of something will play out 50 years from now. If we think the hobby is going where we think it's going, the first of something has to matter a lot. And I think you'll see that play out in time. I'm a big believer in this. I've learned this the hard way. Especially, I got really big into F1 with my wife, watching
Mm,
Drive to Survive and going to races, and like I got really big into that. And I bought a lot of first year, so 2020, and then as it like more came out and the market was so hot, it's COVID days. You get into 2021 and I bought some things that I probably shouldn't have. And I just think ultimately, if the market kind of similar to the goat thing, if the market's going where we think it's going to go, the first year stuff is what's really going to matter.
does that apply to Topps Chrome football?
Yeah, that's going to be because you got to think about this. I was talking with somebody about this yesterday for some content, and it's this idea of like what happens to the first couple of years of Chrome that already
Yeah.
exist before they lost the license. So, 90, what year is it? I mean, 96 for basketball. I know 98 for football is Manning. I don't know how early Chrome football goes back, probably mid 90s. It's like, you have decades of it. Where do you count the first, right? Because the first in 25 is going to be a much different product than even where we left in 2015. The
Yes.
parallels, the chases, the debuts, like
Those gold
2015 and
shields.
they're going to be so different, right? So,
Right.
yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. Is where do you start that timeline? Um,
Or is it the first because it's the first of this
yeah,
one?
this period, yeah, the new age of sports cards. Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot more of it in terms of like, the first couple that come to mind are Prism and Disney. Like,
Okay.
those are two sets I'm very bullish on. 23 Disney is fun. Again, practice what I preach. Like, I collect what I like. Like, I get to collect
Yeah.
Disney stuff with my wife and son. That's not much brings me more joy than that. So I love that. And I also believe in, Prism football as one of the staple products of modern day sports cards.
Hmm.
And believe if 25 Prism is good, then ultimately 2012 Prism has to have some winners in it as the origin story. So yeah, I think that's more where my head goes, but I think the Chrome one is a interesting debate.
I love all this insight. Okay, so prior to COVID, right, people thought that the hobby would die.
Yeah.
What did the pandemic change, and is that change permanent? And correct me if I'm wrong, but like you went full time back in like 2018 before
Yep.
the pandemic. So you
Yeah.
obviously felt strongly about the longevity before everyone else did. So yeah, what did the pandemic change, and is that change permanent?
Um that's a good question. What did the pandemic change? The need for technology in the space. I think we
Mm,
saw a lot of big apps and tech companies come from
yeah,
COVID.
yeah.
Um, you know, the yeah, I think that's probably the thing I'm the most sure of that COVID did. What was the second part of your question?
Yeah, like this change is permanent. People thought like prior, like even during COVID, okay, everyone's gonna go into their attics and their basements and they're gonna get some cards and buy into collectibles and then it will die off. I mean, this space isn't going anywhere, right? So I think technology is certainly an interesting perspective. The more need for technology, we're investing in this space, so it's not
Sure.
going anywhere. But did the pandemic need to happen in order for the hobby to be where it is?
Um, I mean, I think if you go back like pre-COVID, the market was like simmering, right? So like I remember I quit my job in October of 18. That's right around Luca, Trey. The market
Okay.
was like heading in the right direction. There was a lot of momentum around the hobby. I mean, you were starting to get like that was right around the time like the Prism boom started to happen. We were a couple years into
Okay.
Prism. Because if you go back to like early Prism, like, even I'm thinking like 14, 15, 15, 16.
Hmm.
Some of those like Andrew Wiggins, Jokic. You start going back to some of those classes, like nobody wanted Prism Silvers. It wasn't what it is today. And I remember Luca Prism, 1819 Prism, like you could get that below cost. It sat on shelves. Like it wasn't a big deal. So I think the market was like simmering in the right direction. I think what COVID did was bring real immediate attention to the space. I think it took sports cards to a whole different level. I mean, people were at home, nowhere to go, nothing to do, getting paid. Like it allowed you to pick up hobbies because you could do it from afar, and you could pick up your phone and join a break. You could watch a video. Like there was so much interaction with the hobby so quickly. It was very online very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
um I think those things, again, if you look at the COVID timeline, everything went up. There was a 18-month period where if you bought it was pretty much worth more by the time you got it. And now I
Hmm.
think that piece of the hobby has kind of died down a little bit. I think the collecting pool in general is a lot smarter. There's a lot less demand for the right, or there's a lot less demand for the wrong cards. We had Zion based Prism 10s peaked at almost $1,000 during COVID. Those are like $35, $40 cards now. So I think COVID created a lot of insane, quick, get rich demand
Okay.
and hype and attention. And I think that piece of it is gone. But I think people built real businesses and saw that this is a real alternative investment. And I think that's how there are people out there like Kevin O'Leary and like,
Sure.
bigger names who view this as an alternative asset. And then there's people like you and I that like collect these cards and enjoy it and the hobby. So I think it opened the hobby up to a lot more people, and I think ultimately that will be one of the biggest reasons it continues to flourish and continues to grow.
So maybe it was like the catalyst to what the
Yeah, it's like
pandemic was
a
sort of yeah,
for
the
sure. Yeah, I think that's a
initiation.
great way to look at it. Is it added some fuel to the fire, and then ultimately there was a little bit of a cutback period where things went down. I mean, you had cards dropping 30, 50% in a year. I mean, 2022 was rough for sure, especially second half of 22, early into 23.
Yeah.
But yeah, since the last 18 months or so, it's been a whole lot different.
Oh, yeah. How has the hobby changed or affected the way you cheer as a sports fan? You kind of touched on it a little bit. Like you like to collect Disney with your son and your wife, but as a sports fan, and you are like cheering on Sundays for X teams, like how has the hobby affected your sports fandom?
Yeah, I think two parts of that. I am a massive Ohio State fan. There's a Ohio State helmet behind me.
I'm like, there
Um,
it is.
yeah, I'm like, I love Ohio State. So I think for me, the interesting piece is it's allowed me, cards have allowed me to collect more sooner, right? So with NIL, you can collect these guys while they're in school. So as a collector and as like a diehard Buckeye fan, that
Ah,
has certainly enhanced my experience. I think from like the way I watch sports perspective with like the NFL per se, because I love football. That's my sport. Is I think now I root a lot more for like how it impacts cards in general not necessarily like my team is the Patriots, so I would have loved to win a Super Bowl. That'd have been fun, but it would have also been great for Drake May as a card person to
Yes.
win so early. We talk about it. We joked about it with the Shadur Sanders take around he sells more than Rodgers or Stafford, and you look at that and say, well, that's not sustainable if he doesn't win. So I think guys winning championships early on in their career helps solidify some of their prices. And when people are paying a lot of money for some of these cards, like they don't want to see them go to zero. That's not good. So in order to kind of justify some of those prices, they need to win. So I think for me, I look at it and say, wow, if Drake May could win, that would be great for the card market. It would help validify some of his massive sales. Finished second in the MVP, second in the Super Bowl. But at some point, you got to win. So I think I look at it now and say, which one of these matchups in the Super Bowl would be the best for cards, right? I'm
Okay.
like, Joe Burrow versus Brock Purdy. Well, if one of those two guys could get a Super Bowl, that would help there. So I look at it like that. Like, it's fun to see Mahomes win because he's one of the GOATs. But Stafford's already got one. Hurts has already got one. I don't want to see them win. That's not exciting. So I think it's more exciting to see people win that help the validation of some of their card prices. So I think as a football fan now, for the NFL, that's kind of the way I cheer these days.
Do we need to get offensive lineman a card? Because since you're a football fan, it's just absolutely ridiculous. I've asked offensive linemen, and I'm trying to figure out if it's like an all five or something. But I'm like, they're so critical to the success of a game and to the players that have the most money or make the most money from their cards, and yet the big guys. What do we do? Like,
Yeah,
Ryan, help!
Some of them have cards. This would be a pitch to Tops if you wanted to.
I'm ready to go.
Really
Maybe
get
you and I
involved in
can
this.
jump
There's a
in.
product. There's a product from 2000 and I know the last year was like 2006. I think maybe 07. But there's a product from Tops that used to make back in the day. It was cheap, like one of the cheapest in the space. But it had so many cards in the checklist. It was called Tops Total. And it was like thin paper cards, and there was like triples on there. You had like triple lineman cards. So like some of
Hey.
these guys, like there are players in that checklist that like only have cards ever in Tops Total. It was a massive checklist meant for like entry level, like again obscure players like that. Not a whole lot in there. You weren't chasing debut patch autos. You were chasing for different reasons. But yeah, Tops Total was a product back in the day that used to have a lot of those linemen and some of those players that didn't have cards in every Tops release. You could find them in there. So maybe they'll bring that
back Tops Total Chrome. We don't want the paper, but
that's a much better idea.
Just something like right Drake May. What do you want to see? Drake May's offensive line.
Yeah, Drake May, Will Campbell, dual auto.
Wouldn't that be so valuable? Just
it
give
would definitely
the
be an
big man
interesting one.
Okay, and this is just for my own mind, so we can tell discussion I'm having internally, Ryan, because this was very funny to me. But what's up with CardCollector2? Did CardCollector1 or CardCollector get taken? Because you're so big in this space, and I'm like, he's CardCollector2.
Yeah.
Save me.
Fair question. That's I get that one a lot.
Okay.
So funny quick story. Again, just being in this hobby every day for a couple 2 decades now. Back in the day when I was in like junior high and got access to the internet, forums were a big deal. So you got on forums social media didn't exist. Like, the early Instagram days were like 2013. So back in the day, like the 07, 08, 09, it was like Blowout Card Forum, Sports Card Forum, Beckett Forum. And my handle on those pages was just Card Collector. And I remember I was looking for a place to post photos. So like, again, I'm going to date myself, but like Photo Bucket was a thing back in the day, and you could post photos on there, and then you would link it on a forum and say, these are my cards for trade. Well, when Photo Bucket started to try to charge money, I was like, I'm not going to, like, why would I ever pay for this? And Instagram was starting out. I was like, this is a good place. I could post my cards here. Let me just go post my cards on Instagram. That would make so much more sense. So I went to Instagram to post, like to create a little account where I could post all my photos and I could share it online and say, hey, here's all my cards. and I went to Instagram, and Card Collector was taken, and I was like, well, you know, my lucky number growing up was always 2, so I'm like, this just makes a ton of sense. Like, I could see how we could get from Card Collector to Card Collector 2. So yeah, I just made it Card Collector 2 on Instagram, and
That tracks.
one thing led to another, and here we are. So
my AOL handle, which that dates me, my AOL handle, I wanted Yankee Girl, and Yankee Girl was taken, and so Yankee Girl, QUI, was my means for fulfilling my Yankee fandom as a child growing up with AOL, slow internet.
man, I love the AOL days.
Yeah, gosh, goodness. Don't miss how slow that internet was, but I do appreciate
For
nostalgia
sure.
of it, for sure. Ryan, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. This was freaking awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.